A common issue with websites is how to handle user interface elements and navigation, particularly menus. JavaScript can help make them smarter and more functional and more useful. In this example, we're going to use JavaScript to create what can be called a sliding menu, an accordion menu. Basically, it's a menu that when we click on, say, the word comedies here, the word tragedies and histories will move down and more options will show up. And it's straightforward to do with JavaScript, so let's check it out. Here's our HTML for the page. It's straightforward. There's a link to a style sheet, link to our JavaScript that we're going to write, a header, some menu items, tragedies, and histories, all inside divs. Our CSS is pretty minimal. We're setting some colors, some padding. We're setting our ul.menu to be display none, which is keeping those secondary elements from displaying when we loaded the page previously, even though they were there in the HTML page. So we're going to use JavaScript to make them show up sometime. If you have access to the exercise files, we're looking at Chapter 12, Example 1, script.html, script.css, and script.js. Here's our skeleton of script.js, and now we need to fill in the blanks. By now, you should be familiar with window.onload being set to initAll and having to type in stuff for initAll. Var alllinks is document.get elements by tag name A. This is going to get every link on the page. So we're going to have an array of links, which is why we call it all links. For var I equals 0, I less than all links dot length, I plus plus. That's our usual loop. We start off with I. We want to go around however many times based on the number of links on the page, and then we increment to I. If all links I dot class name dot index of menu link is greater than -1, then we want to set all links I dot onClick to call toggle menu. And that is going to handle our menu toggling. So next up is toggle menu. A few variables to start off with. Start menu is this.href dot last index of. Last index of, and then a string, is very similar to index of, which we've used before, most recently right here. This just checked to see if menu link was anywhere in the class name. This doesn't just check to see if there's a slash in the string, it checks to find the very last one. That's because we're going to be using the link source, or the link destination name, the URL that it would normally point to figure out which menu we're going to expand. So we're grabbing the name, and if you think about a URL, everything after the final slash is the page name. Given that this was triggered by an on-click on a link, based on this is going to be the link itself. So this is a link, href is the destination of the link, last index of slash gets the position of the last slash in the string, and adding 1 to it gives us the position of where we're starting to get the file name. Var stop menu is this.href dot last index of. That's looking for the very last period in the file name. It's going to tragedies.html. It's going to just find the word tragedies. And then we set var this menu name is this.href.substring based on the two values we just set. Start menu and stop menu. And as I said with, for instance, comedies.html, this menu name will be comedies. Okay, we've got that. So now we want this menu, new variable, initialized and then set to document.get element by ID, this menu name dot style. So we're getting the style property of the menu that we've just figured out we needed. If this menu dot display equals block, then we set this menu dot display to be none, else we set this menu dot display to be block. So you can see here what we're doing is toggling this value. We're looking to find out if the display property is currently set to block. If it is block, we set it to none. If it's not block, we set it to block. So it's just going to toggle back and forth, either block or none. Using that CSS property, JavaScript tells the browser whether or not to display that chunk of menu. And because it's a link, we need to return false so that we don't actually follow it. Now, save your file and let's take a look at how it works. Looks good. And then these are links here as well. And when you click on it, it pops back up again. So using this method, your navigation does not have to take up anywhere near as much area, but you can still include all the information on your page by just adding a little bit of JavaScript to your site. Next up, more menus. Another type of common menu is pop-up or pop-down, whichever term you prefer to use. Menus that, when you scroll over the main navigation, new information appears instead of clicking on it and it stays there, which is what this is doing right now. We're going to start with the code from the previous exercise and modify it so that it turns into a pop-up menu. And then we're going to end by taking our vertical pop-up menu and turning it into a horizontal pop-up menu. You're going to see exactly how simple it is to go from one to the other. Let's take a look at the HTML file, which is identical, line for line, just the same as it was in the previous exercise. For those of you looking at the exercise files, this is Chapter 12, Example 2, script.html. And there's nothing particularly new or novel in this. Our script.css file is slightly different, but nothing that really matters terribly. Our JS file, though, we're starting with the previous version, and now we're going to add just what we need to turn it into the new type of menu. Init all, again, starts with getting all the links on the page. Now, if it's a menu link, if it's an on-click, we want to call a function we're going to be writing shortly called retFalse. And as you might guess from the name, all it's going to do is return false. Because all the work is going to be done by another routine we're about to write. On mouse over equals toggle menu. Though actually, we're not quite going to write it, we're just going to modify the existing one. We're going to rewrite it. And that's the extent of all our changes in init all. We scroll down and take a look at toggle menu, start menu, stop menu, and this menu name are identical. What we now need to do is set document.get element by ID, this menu name dot style dot display equals block. We do that instead of having to do all of this code here down at the end because we want it to always display in a block if we've moved the cursor over it, and that's how toggle menu gets called in the first place. So we want that to happen. So let's delete the code we don't need anymore. Now we're going to add a smidge more code right here. This dot parent node dot class name equals this menu name. This dot parent node dot on mouse out is toggle div off, and this dot parent node dot on mouse over equals toggle div on. The point of this code is because if you just move the cursor over the link and the stuff below it goes down, you don't want all of those new menu items to suddenly go away once you try to move the mouse onto one of them. So you want the on mouse over and on mouse out to now work for that entire block, not just that one line. So what we're doing is getting the parent of this menu, of this link, setting its class name to be the menu name, setting the on mouse out to toggle the entire div off, and setting the on mouse over to turn the entire div on. And that way, as long as we're over this entire area, it will stay up. And once we leave any part of this area entirely, it will go down. So as you'd guess, we now need to add toggle div on and toggle div off. Function toggle div on is set to document.get element by ID. This dot class name dot style dot display equals block. By setting the class name to be the ID of the block we want to show, we've stored the class name as a reference to our ID. Toggle div off is virtually identical, so I'm just going to copy it and paste it. Instead of block, we set it equal to be none. And finally, there's our very last bit here, which is function ret false. And all that does is return false, so that if somebody does happen to click on the link, it doesn't actually take them somewhere. The menu just drops down as normal. We're going to save our file, switch back out to our browser, and reload this page, and see how it works. It shows up when I cursor it over it, and when I leave, it goes off. It stays up when I'm over any part of this div and goes away when I go off of it, and these are live active links here. Now let's try one other thing. Let's say that instead of wanting our menu to go vertically down, one below the other, we want it to go across. You'd think, man, that might be a whole lot of code that we have to write just to do that. The amount of JavaScript we have to write is 0, none at all. What we have to do is write some CSS. The amount of CSS we have to write is 1 line. All I do is say float left, save this out, go back to the browser, reload the page, and now here's our pull-down menu, just the way you've seen them on so many sites. And that's how to do your pull-down and pop-up menus, either horizontally or vertically. Next up is a slideshow with captions. Earlier in this course, I talked about how to build a slideshow and different ways to do slideshows. But what if you want a slideshow with captions? For instance, if you're telling people about your summer vacation, maybe you want to say something about your pictures besides just having people look at them. And, of course, JavaScript can handle that just fine. So let's get to it. If you have access to the exercise files, we're looking at Chapter 12, Example 4, script.html. And our HTML page is straightforward. We've got a picture with an ID of slideshow, and we've got a form that handles our previous and next clicks. And then we've got a div that's going to be the text associated with a given image. Our CSS file is straightforward. There's some padding, some fonts, some colors, some margins. Nothing particularly novel here. So onto the JavaScript. In the skeleton here, I've left in all the captions so that we don't have to type them all in again. And we know we're going to need, because we know we have a certain number of pictures, we're going to need that many captions in our array. So the caption text is just an array of strings which will display with their associated image. So, as usual, we're going to now have to create our initAll function. And all we want to do is set up what our image text is going to be. And we want to set clicks on those link buttons to process our slideshow. So let's call document.getElementById. We want to set up image text dot inner HTML equals caption text 0. And that is the caption that we want to appear on the page to go along with image 0, which is displaying when the page loads. Next up, document.get element by ID previous link dot on click is set to process previous. And let's copy and paste this line so we don't have to type it all in again, because all we want to change is next link to call process next. And that's everything there. But now here's process previous and process next.